Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us tonight for Scrutiny Panel number 2's meeting on Ealing, Seven Towns and regeneration. I'd like to begin by welcoming our panel members and officers to the meeting the second meeting this municipal year. It's being held in hybrid form with some members and officers and with a member joining the meeting online and others being present in the room. The meeting is also being live streamed on YouTube. I'd just like to remind anyone joining online to remain on mute wherever possible and to raise their hand using the Teams functionality if they wish to speak. Item number 1, apologies for absence and substitutions. I have no apologies other than Councillor Mohan letting me know that he is joining our panel this evening online. Have any other members of the panel received apologies from anyone? No, wonderful, thank you very much. And I don't believe we have substituted anyone, so that's fantastic. Item number 2, urgent matters. I do not believe we have any urgent matters arising. I've not been informed of any. Do any members have anything to rate? No, jolly good. Item number 3, I do not believe there are also any items to be considered in private. Item number 4, declarations of interest. Do any panel members have any personal or prejudicial interest in any of the matters on the agenda that they wish to declare this evening? Fantastic. So we move now to item number 5, the minutes of the last meeting. Do members of the panel agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of July 2025? Councillor Crawford. Do you want to use your microphone for online attendees?
Yeah, of course. Sorry, Chair. Just to reflect that I attempted to attend the meeting online but couldn't do so.
Of course, that's absolutely fine.
So,
yeah.
Thank you.
Good.
I tried, but I couldn't. So I guess.
No, that's fine. I think you gave your apologies, and I think they were recorded, were they not?
Oh no. But the point is, no. I tried to get in.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. And as having attended in the minutes, so maybe we should amend that. So, fine. Any other amendments to the minutes? Thank you very much, Councillor Crawford. Wonderful. And is everyone happy with the minutes as amended?
Yep.
Agreed. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Item number 6, panel operations in the year 25-26. The panel work programme, which has previously been shared and I don't think is significantly updated from previous versions that we have shared. So that was agreed previously. Is the panel happy with that? Agreed. Wonderful. Thank you very much. So we now move on to item number 7, the core feature of this evening's meeting, economy and sustainability of the economy and sustainability scrutiny panel with a focus on the economy. I'd like to thank very much and specifically our guests, officers and other visitors that have joined us this evening. I'd like to thank you very much for your time. I know it's a lot of burden to prepare for this and a lot of extra work, but it's important in terms of scrutinising the work of the council. So thank you for supporting that. Obviously, we'd also like to welcome Councillor Nagpal, who is kindly joining us as the Cabinet member responsible for this area. Thank you very much for joining us. I think we want
to add my thanks to Chair, if I could, for yesterday I was on the walkabout, and this is excellent effort from officers guiding us and showing us what there is and what's to be considered. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the insight and effort that has gone into providing a great support for councillors to undertake their scrutiny here. I'd be grateful if officers could introduce themselves and explain a little about their role just before they start speaking. But other than that, I think it's time to move on to the presentation. Who will be beginning that process?
Thanks, Chair. I'll start. I'm Councillor Cam Nagpal, Cabinet Member for Decent Living supports employment as well as housing. We've strengthened the role of our industrial and town centres so that they can support key sectors and create better paid jobs for residents of Ealing. And we've introduced an affordable workspace policy. Together, these steps have been crucial in linking our ambitions for different sectors with our plans for growth across the borough. Now, I can already see progress that we've made since the restructuring of our Regeneration, Economy and Skills Department and the Planning, Design and Sustainability Department, led by Connor and Jen, who are here this evening and will take you through the report shortly. And this is very much a joint effort. And I want to reassure the panel that there's no silo working in this part of the council's business. And it's not just me saying that. The recent LGA Peer Challenge looked very closely at this work. Their report recognised that this is an area of real maturity and strength. They highlighted how both departments are driving forward the council's ambitions for polycentric growth and for connected communities. And finally, I'd like to thank William from Luxgrove for joining us this evening. And William is going to be talking about Luxgrove's investment to help improve West Ealing's local economy. Thank you. And I'm going to hand over to Connor and the team to talk through the presentation and report.
Thank you. It's on, just checking it's on first. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Nagpal, for that introduction. Absolute pleasure to be back here today to talk about our work in supporting Ealing's economy, particularly through placemaking and regeneration and planning, those levers that we have. So we've got a presentation here. Of course, yeah, so my name's Conor McDonough. I'm the Assistant Director for Regeneration, Economy and Skills at Ealing Council. And in a nutshell, my role is about how we create new jobs in the borough and how we also attract new businesses, retain the good businesses we have. Two key metrics for me in the current council plan relate to 10,000 new job opportunities, 12,000 new training and skills opportunities, 5,000 new apprenticeships, which we're all on track to likely exceed by March of next year before the local elections. So very, very proud of all the hard work the team has been doing on that. But the focus of tonight is obviously about our 7 towns and how we're growing our local economies. So I'm going to kick off with the first few slides, and then my colleague Jen will do a few which are more planning focused, and then we'll hand over to Laura, who will take us through the case study of West Ealing. So yes, starting with the policy context. So it's important that we highlight how we're aligned. So Councillor Nagpal's already mentioned a couple of key strategies here, but just to pick these out again. So at the national level, we're very much aligned with the National Planning Policy Framework and also the Modern Industrial Strategy. So we're all very pleased that after many years, the UK now has an industrial strategy which sets out a very clear direction of travel, particularly around growing our high growth sectors, of which we're lucky to have a number of in Ealing, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then going down into the regional level, the London plan, which you're all very familiar with, dating back to 2021, but there's going to be a new London plan coming through soon. And we've also got the London Growth Plan, which Councillor Nagpal acknowledged. Again, very excited to have that because it's the first growth plan London has ever had, and it's very much focused on the economy, which is really good for me, in particular, the department I lead. And then coming down into the local level, I did mention the council plan and the key metrics within that, the new local plan, which Jen will talk about, and our jobs skills strategy, which Councillor Nagpal has also acknowledged. Very proud to say that we managed to get our jobs and skills strategy published just over a year ago now, actually in advance of those two national and regional strategies, and it is in full alignment with those, and that's probably a testament to our partnership working with colleagues at the Greater London Authority as well. So we're very plugged into that. So moving on to the next slide, which has a bit of a focus on the actual council plan. And I'm not going through all of this in detail, but just picking out a couple of key things here. So creating good jobs is the real sort of thrust of tonight's discussion. particularly around business growth, intensification of employment areas, etc. But it's very cross-cutting with the other two key strategic objectives, particularly around tackling the climate crisis. A big part of the work we're doing is how we're growing the green economy in Ealing and the various subsectors within that. We're very privileged, for example, to have sustainable logistics across the borough. We've got a large reservoir of industrial land, lots of food production, manufacturing in places like Southall and Park Royal. And then last but not least, how we're fighting inequality. So the department I lead is also responsible for priority 5 of the Race Equality Commission to create more jobs, particularly for our residents that have lots of barriers to get employment, and also how we're influence strategic partners to focus more on inequalities as well, particularly conversations with the likes of Old Oak, Park Royal Development Corporation, High Speed 2, etc. So holding their feet to the fire as well to make sure they deliver on our aspirations around that. Moving on to the next slides, that's very useful to highlight the Connected Communities vision in here. So that's the council's recently announced vision, how we're working to connect our communities. And I think from this particular context here, I won't go into all the detail, but an example of this is how we are ensuring that resident communities and business communities are better connected, because there's probably a bit of a disconnect at the moment. We want to create a borough which is a very inclusive economy, whereby you've got local jobs for local people, and that ultimately helps with other things like inequality and sustainability as well. So it's probably through that sort of lens that this sort of work is really focusing, and also the infrastructure we work to deliver to physically connect communities with their whether that's through sustainable transport and things like that. So that's a key aspect of what we're doing here today. As you can appreciate, there's a lot of moving parts to this, and many different levers we can pull on to ultimately achieve this good growth across each of our 7 towns. So what we've tried to do here is distill that into 4 strategic areas, which I'll cover a couple, and then Jen will come in on some of those as well. So when we're applying these sort of guiding principles, it's on a borough-wide level, but you can all equally apply them to each of the 7 towns as well, despite the fact they're all quite unique in their own ways. So the first thing to mention is our Good for Ealing Inward Investment Programme. So this is very much about promoting the borough to the outside world, in terms of attracting the very best investment into the borough and our 7 towns. And that's very important, particularly nowadays where you've got a highly competitive global economy, in London in particular, with all the boroughs around us trying to fight for the same investment. Ealing, it's very important. Ealing is shouting loud about how amazing our borough is and how amazing our 7 towns are to come and invest in. And you can already see a lot of that stuff happening through, obviously, the investments in North Acton, Southall, along the Uxbridge Road corridor. But equally, we want to ensure places like Perryvale, Northall, Tanwell also benefit from that growth, and that will be a theme of this presentation as well. And West Ealing, of course, which we'll talk about in more detail. So I guess in this context is about how the council is really applying some of its softer powers around convening, enabling and brokering. So we convene a sector forum for each of the sectors we've got in the borough. We were just at the local London Real Estate Forum yesterday, banging Ealing's drum. I think we had the highest number of Ealing attendees there, and we had a nice panel where we had Councillor Mason talking about the borough as well. So really important work in that area. Moving on to the next slide. Look at the screen for this one. So through the Good for Ealing programme, we're also exerting our muscles a bit better in terms of strategic influencing. So again, this is how we're engaging with the GLA, how we're engaging with government departments, and there's a couple of examples in there about what we're doing. So we recently had the Deputy Mayor for Business over in Ealing. He was meeting colleagues at Imperial College, the local bids, having a look at some of our opportunity sites, meetings with MHCLG. They were down in Southall recently looking around the development there, and obviously through North Acton, lots of work with OPDC colleagues. So really getting the best out of that soft power as well. Moving on to the next slide. Yeah, this sort of picks up some of those strategies I mentioned earlier, but I think probably it's worthwhile mentioning how we're trying to bring some pioneering thinking to this agenda as well. So we're not just copying what other boroughs are doing, we're trying to set the standard and the exemplar for other boroughs to copy us, and sort of build on the successes we're having. So a couple of things I'll point out here. Imperial West Tech London, so that was formerly known as the West Tech Innovation Corridor. Through the work of the council and our departments in particular, we managed to ensure that that's heavily featured within the London Growth Plan, with all the good work that we've done in engaging with the Greater London Authority and London and partners. We're also very pivotal in actually ensuring OPDC, with that huge regeneration, actually paid more attention to this and actually got into a partnership with Imperial to work together on enabling and catalysing West Tech London. And some of the commercial floor space that we'll see in the OPDC area will be, prioritised for frontier and innovation economy uses like life sciences. So again, Ealing using its convening power to ensure that would happen, that might not have happened otherwise. And some pioneering research with the Centre of London on polycentric growth. So supporting the leader of Councillor Mason with those endeavours and making sure that all the good stuff that's happening in the Central Activity Zone can equally happen over in Ealing and boroughs that are on the fringes of the CAS. And we have to remember that Ealing is perfectly positioned right between Heathrow Airport, High Speed 2, and the Central Activity Zone as well. So we're at the very epicentre of all the amazing economic benefits that the London and the UK can really grasp. Next slide. I think that's moving on to Jen now.
Thank you. So I'm Jen Peters, Assistant Director for Planning, Design and Sustainability. So I kind of part about enabling good growth, I suppose, and as already mentioned, work very closely with the Regen team and obviously planning applications coming through my service. Regen also kind of comment on those and influence them, so it's very joined up. What we've got there is a polycentric approach to growth, which has already been mentioned. We've got our new local plan. As you probably know, it's quite a long process, so that's still going through the process. We're in examination in public still at the moment. We've got another set of sessions later in the year in December, but the whole kind of structure of that plan is quite new in the way that it looks at those 7 towns, as kind of already been explained, trying to make sure that they all benefit from growth, both in terms of housing and commercial opportunities, and things are kind of balanced. The investment is balanced across the borough and not focused just on one area or on one corridor. Next slide, please. So that sort of sets that out in a bit more detail. What we're trying to look at is, making sure that we're bringing in that investment in those different areas that reflects what those areas need, what the communities need, and how they can develop, and they'll all develop differently, which is important of understanding that. And what we want to make sure is that no particular area is being overlooked or overshadowed by others. Next slide, please. And part of that is our kind of commitment to 20-minute neighbourhoods. And what that is all about is ensuring that every sort of community has that access to local jobs, services and amenities in a kind of walkable or wheelable distance, to reduce the need to travel, but also promote that kind of sense of choice, and that your areas can cater for those needs. And we've done quite a lot of work looking at what that actually means. There's lots of, we've got our 20-minute frameworks for all the different towns to kind of look into exactly what the towns require. And then our 20-minute manual is about making sure that when applicants come to us with new schemes, they understand or go through the process of trying to understand what amenities are actually needed in that area, and they can deliver on, which is really positive, because without that you're kind of at the whim of the market a little bit. Next slide, please. And this is just kind of setting out a little bit around that we've got all of these different kind of strategies and that they all feed into each other. And I think that's really important. The kind of joint working between the different teams and across the council mean that all of the different strategies and plans speak to each other and deliver each other's visions. And we've got, as I mentioned, those 7 town regeneration frameworks. They are much more detailed. Then we have all these programme boards that actually looks at the delivery and works closely with the different landowners and different actors in the areas. And then one of the things we looked at, we wanted to make sure that we had balanced housing and jobs, and we had a look at all of the site allocations within the local plan. So this is areas, sites that have been said that we want to come forward for certain uses. And what we've done there is broken them down to the ones that are housing led, the ones that are mixed use, and ones that are employment led. And you'll see, yeah, there's different numbers of allocations in different towns, but there's a good mix across those different uses for each town, which is obviously what the plan and that polycentric growth is trying to enable.
Thanks, Jen. And just back to me for one more slide. Jen's already helpfully mentioned the number of partnerships that the Ealing Council sets up and convenes. So you can see here a tremendous amount of partnerships. Actually, it was quite interesting pulling this slide together because it just reminded me of the number of partnerships we've set up over the last few years. And it's important to note that we do this on a spatial approach, so a town approach, but also a sectoral approach as well. So it's about convening, businesses that are within a certain sector, or else convening landowners and developers and other stakeholders that might have a specific role to play in a town. And obviously William and the role Luxgrove play in West Ealing is very important, and William's a very important contributor to our Ealing Met Centre Forum and the West Ealing Action Group as well. And you can see along the bottom there's a number of internal boards that sort of prop these external partnerships up as well. So we've got a Connected Communities Board, Placemaking Board, Climate Leadership Board, and a range of cabinet member briefings.
Hi, my name's Laura McLean. I'm the area manager for regeneration, investments and jobs working on the west of the borough. So, sorry, can you hear me? I'm working in Ealing, Southall and Northolt. I'm also looking into, we've launched the green economy and the high growth subsectors, and which we're on next week. We are launching the Industrial Decarbonisation Forum. And then a couple of months ago, we launched the Food Manufacturing and Production Forum. But I'm going to talk you through West Ealing this evening. West Ealing is a well-performing town centre with strong footfall and low commercial vacancy rates, and it's poised to build on its success by fostering business growth and meeting its critical mass. It's fortunate that we've got a new Elizabeth Line station, which has also been a big catalyst for the significant development that we're seeing around the station and also on the Uxbridge Road. It's a really attractive place for investment within the Ealing Metropolitan Centre. And over the next few years, we'll see 1,800 new homes, 400 student accommodation, over 100 co-living and 270 apart hotel beds. And in addition to that, we'll have 8,600 square metres of new commercial space with the projected job growth of 570 jobs. Key to harnessing this good growth is our kind of really strong partnership relationships that's Connor sort of touched upon, and the sort of existing civic community and the pride that the businesses and residents have for the place. And we have really strong working relationships with the In West Ealing BID, the West Ealing Community Library, the Caribbean African Collective, and the West London Islamic Centre, and they play a critical role for that enhancing the area and that sort of sustainable growth. We're really taking a proactive approach by working across our services, so working with our community safety team, the BID, and we've seen some recent investment via UKSPF from central government into sort of high street improvements. This development will transform the Uxbridge Road, it will transform West Ealing Station, and it will transform the sort of arrival experience. But we want to make sure that our communities and future communities benefit from this growth. We've been working internally to sort of understand the growth that is taking place by sort of analysing the kind of planning applications that are coming forward, which you can see on the sort of development plan, and kind of what came out of a recent ward council meeting is that we're going to be updating this quarterly, so local councillors are aware of the development that's coming forward and the statuses of all those developments. West Ealing was sort of identified within the 20-minute neighbourhood framework, and the team have already done extensive engagement and with our local stakeholders to sort of really shape what the vision should be. And we're really keen and sort of on the connected communities theme to be building upon and championing a local vision for West Ealing, which will support local business network, enhance public realm, and diversify the offer of the local footfall, but while maximising on the Elizabeth Line connection. The placemaking opportunities have been identified. There's 6 within the kind of existing framework, and a few have already been completed via the West Ealing Livable Neighbourhoods programme delivered by our highways team. But there's also kind of opportunities to build upon this spatial strategy in the new work that's going to be coming forward from the High Street Place Labs, which I'll talk about shortly. We've done some recent site analysis, so working on the building upon these spatial strategies and sort of understanding where kind of potential opportunities will come forward. And on the recent site walkabout, we sort of talked about that kind of north-south connection as being a really big and a real big priority to sort of to enable the new residents to be going to the Uxbridge Road from the Elizabeth Line, and sort of building and making sure that those kind of active travel routes are sort of safe and also kind of can be enhanced with sort of like, you know, green infrastructure and more planting. We do appreciate that there are kind of areas where there is ASB, and so building that into a future brief so that we can be sort of really action focused to sort of enhance like natural surveillance, active frontages, and sort of identify where there could be potential like infill opportunities at the back of house, so creating secondary high street streets where there could be more commercial activity. West Ealing Liverpool neighbourhoods, there's already there's been quite a bit of investment around the Dean Gardens, on Greenman Passage, Jacob's Ladder, and the next schemes will be coming forward, which will enhance a cycle path in Dean Gardens, Witham Road car park, which connects onto the Uxbridge Road via the Greenman Passage, Manor Road and Bedford Road. We appreciate there's lots of existing really good strategies from Ealing's Economy After 6 PM, and which was adopted in September 2024. And we'll be embedding these recommendations within our future commission for the High Street Place Lab, because it's one thing that's been identified by the GLA is about nighttime activity and the nighttime economy. And that sort of leads me to sort of talk about the GLA High Street Place Labs, which we have been selected as one of 12 London boroughs, recognising the need for investment, but also one of the criteria was about having those existing relationships, and so we've got the relationship with the bid, and also we've been convening West Ealing developers under the Developers Forum to sort of on a quarterly basis. It's a small amount of money, but it hopefully will lead to future capital funding from the GLA. It's £50,000, and it will kickstart the London Growth Plan under local places to create local places where people want to spend time, money, day and night, and will also increase the team's capacity to develop more local growth strategies and win investment to make it happen. The successful submission will look at a ground for activation strategy, which will help shape commercial and retail meanwhile use, but also look at complementing existing planning developments that are coming forward, and also complementing the West Ealing Livable Neighbourhoods public realm programme. We'll look at sort of good job creation, creating a thriving town centre and nighttime economy, while also sort of addressing some of the sort of challenges that we see on this high street, but it's not a high street that's dissimilar to a lot of places within London and regionally. It's going to be action orientated with a 1 to 3 year or maybe 1 to 5 year delivery plan, and we'll be looking at how we want to shape with our stakeholders, our communities and our partners future Section 106 investment. It's a very short timeline. The funding needs to be completed the strategy needs to be completed by March 2026, and we're looking to appoint a consultant within the coming months. So we'll be looking to be doing one-to-one workshops with local stakeholders, but also not with this funding and the consultant sign. We're conscious not to sort of repeat previous engagement that we've and not sort of and working with the kind of previous engagement responses. So we'll be looking potentially to look at working with communities that we haven't sort of like spoken to before. But yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much. I believe so now in terms of the okay. Thank you very much. Now I think we're going to do a Q&A about the kind of the West Ealing bit in particular, and then move on maybe to broader kind of recommendations after that. So do any members of the panel have questions that they would like to ask? I think.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
I think William.
Okay.
Sorry. I didn't know the order, but I think it might be in a good time for William to just say his bit, and then we can move to the Q&A if that's okay.
That's great. That's what I
cool.
thought we were going to do, and
Yeah.
then we didn't.
Thank
So,
you.
Mr. McKenna.
There we go. Can you hear me? Good evening. Much of what I was probably going to say has been touched on there, well, a bit by all panel members, but specifically by Laura. But just some brief context for those who haven't met or are not aware. So Luxgrove is predominantly a real estate developer. Worth highlighting, but we're a developer and also operator. So we have long-term interest in the borough and also in the investments that we make. Specifically in West Ealing, we identified West Ealing circa 2021. And in reality, the opportunity for us is the fact that within those 7 towns that we talk about, in our opinion, is one of the ones which is most in need of regeneration. Specifically that high street, which although you mentioned that there's high occupancy, if we really look at it, it's not a particularly functioning high street. The occupancy is somewhat transient. There's a lot of turnover. And I would say it's really lacking a coordinated strategy. So the strategy that we've tried to employ is, if you're a single landowner, it's very difficult to do anything. We now have 5 development sites within 200 meters along the Broadway, and with development plans, all the sites are now consented. We're at different stages of development on them, but in really simple numbers, we're talking today about jobs, employment, transformation. Yet the construction cost across those jobs is circa 150 million. So that's 150 million normally going into a local economy with a lot of local jobs. That's 850 residents who will be living in those apartments, hotels, co-living units by 2027-28. So for us, where there's a huge opportunity is, we know that we're going to deliver those sites. This isn't speculative. We have funding, they'll be built. When you then have 850 people, suddenly they need to have a gym, they need to have a coffee shop. You've got increasingly in areas like this, people who want to work from home a day here, a day there. Those people need daytime activities. They also need the nighttime activities. So part of the strategy is obviously what we can control within our own ownership titles. Where we've been working with the team over the last year here is ideally trying to get a more coordinated approach. And that, when I say coordinated approach, you could probably highlight this as being infrastructure. So infrastructure really requires council coordination. It's been a challenging development environment, hopefully getting better. But if I look at what's happening in West Ealing, you now have the schemes around the station which are coming forward. there's our schemes. For me, the opportunity in the next 18 months is to try and coordinate between the key developers and landowners, so that we shouldn't be competing with each other in a really simple strategy. We should be working as a group, trying to say, right, how can we bring, it could be events, it could be ultimately awareness to the fact that this is a transforming area. And I mean, when I say that, we don't all need to do a farmers market, for instance, right? There should be a farmers market. There should be. We've spoken a lot about artistic rolling events, for instance, and I think that, from a council perspective, it's probably too early because the units aren't built yet. But as we move forward, I think that's where there can be coordination by yourselves. And I think it was you, Connor, who touched on it. You mentioned coordination between residents and business, and I think that's a key bit. Is, you know, once you so often see this, that you know, someone lives 100 meters away and they're not really aware of what's going on around the corner. And this particular area to the south, you've got Northfields, very good residential areas. To the north, as again, very good residential areas. At the moment, everyone walks away from the high street, and yeah, they need to be encouraged back. Infrastructure changes, etc., will do that. And then I think also the messaging once, but we need the high street transformed a bit before we can change that messaging. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good, and I think that will, I suspect, spark plenty of discussion amongst the panel. Mr. McKenna, I'm very grateful that you said particularly what you did at the start, which is that I think as someone passing through West Ealing, if there may be technically high levels of commercial occupancy, it doesn't necessarily feel that way to people viewing the high street. I wonder whether officers can offer some guidance on how that comes to pass in a technical sense, that we can claim that there are high levels of occupancy there, but that's not how it's seen by residents. Is there someone who is that a statistical issue? Is it because they are leased but nothing's actually using the sites? Someone able to kind of comment briefly on that?
Well, from speaking with the bid, when a vacancy, when a site becomes vacant, it doesn't normally stay vacant for long. But I appreciate Will's comment about it being like there's quite a lot of changeover, and that's something we want to sort of prevent. We want to see long-lasting businesses. We want some more curation. We want to be attracting, like Will said, you know, residents from Northfields and South and Pittshanger, like, and also the sort of provide for like the future population, and that's something we're really keen to sort of work with the bid on more for that curation. But yeah, we're not disagreeing with that.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And Mr. McKenna, again, you talked about kind of previous iterations of redevelopment in other areas. In the looking at a context similar to West Ealing, what have you found has worked in the past that can be done by the local authority? You've talked a little bit about it being a bit early to begin some things. What activities could Ealing Council be undertaking now, and how would you programme other activities that they need to undertake?
So to use an example that people are probably familiar with would be looking at, say, King's Cross, which that 20 years ago was an area no one would decide, let's go and spend Saturday afternoon in. That's obviously an area which has had huge infrastructure investments, and I think we need to be realistic. You're not going to have the same level here, but there's many. Another one is actually Marylebone High Street, which again was done 20 years ago. That's a good example of where you didn't have one landowner, but it was coordinated by the De Warden estate, and many of the activities that they do could easily be replicated. So they have at least 2 or 3 sort of, I'm thinking of the summer fairs that they do, but you know, pedestrianize the road for an afternoon. And it's, you know, all of them normally have a different flair. So some of them are encouraging more of the food and beverage side of it, where you do have days where the road is closed and the restaurants are allowed to sort of take over the road. In fact, you've seen bits of Soho have done that as well recently. So I think there's a lot that can be done that I don't necessarily think needs huge amounts of money, but it needs coordination from business. And I would just say, in relation to the point I made on the high street, it's probably a slightly unfair assessment. What I was alluding to is if you were to walk down and say what percentage is occupied, I'm going to guess 30% is boarded up, and it's partly because development stalled, and it creates that perception. And then I think the problem that you've had, there's been 2 or 3 new venues that have opened, which did have investment, and they closed down quickly. And I think that's all sort of linked to the fact that, unfortunately, it's not getting the footfall it requires. Yeah, there have been security issues raised, but yeah, I think that can definitely be changed.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gallant.
Sure. I'm not loud enough. Thank you very much. So thank you very much. Now there's a question about the London plan, the London growth plan, the local plan, and the council plan, and the other plans that you've mentioned. We relate to the general public. How are you going to make the general public aware of that? How are you going to put that message across those regimes, if you like? How are you going to put that across so that they understand that as well? Or is it too complicated for them to understand? And that's very provocative. Another question for Laura, if I may. You touched on infill opportunities in back streets and so on. Could you just elaborate that a little bit more? Because we talked about it quite a lot yesterday, but if you could just sort of give an example of how that might work out. I've got a wonderful idea for it, which is a museum for the violin family. That would be a perfect thing to put there. Nothing to do with me, but somebody who came to me with a wonderful opportunity. There are lots and lots of ideas that could be used there, as you know. But if you could explain that a bit more. General question. We all know that it's very difficult to get office space is a problem. It's very difficult to find big clients for office space. What are we going to do about that to attract those people who are going to come work there, hopefully live close by and spend their money in all the bars and restaurants and shops as well? And we talked about nighttime economy. That in the public eye is bars and restaurants, but it's lots of other things as well. What else can it be? What else can we do to sort of stimulate a nighttime economy?
Thank you, Councillor Gallant.
Thanks, Chair. I'll take the first one. So around the kind of the different strategies and how they all feed into each other, and how the kind of general public can understand that. To an extent, you don't necessarily need to, as long as it's feeding through into the documents. And I would say in the documents that we put out, we explain how it links to those other wider, more strategic strategies or GLA level strategies, and then explain how it links down into the local level. But I think the key, and what we've been trying to do in some of our documents, is just to make it more accessible anyway, make it more understandable for the local level. So I don't think you have to explain it in too much detail, as long as people kind of understand the drivers. And then I think Laura was next.
So when we did the walkabout, we were sort of looking at sites that were sort of parallel to the Uxbridge Road. So on Witham Road, Singapore and Canberra, where we have these kind of issues of maybe overspilling bins and sort of like, maybe not legal parking, but that we have identified in the sort of initial site analysis scoping that these could be opportunities for building out an infill. So it could be more commercial space, but in a kind of curated way that kind of complements the new developments coming forward, but making those secondary streets. So it could be affordable workspace, could be creative space, it could be artist space, it could be there's also opportunities for some of the commercial buildings, some of the opening up the rear wall by having windows, so that you actually have that kind of natural surveillance and you're creating a secondary active frontage. And yeah, I just, we like, you see it all around London, and Marylebone's a really lovely example, but also in our London villages where you kind of see the overspill of retail that goes like beyond just that on that kind of main high street. So I think there's real potential there, and kind of building on that north and south connectivity, because there will be lots of people walking by, and it would be nice if there was something happening on those streets. So there is that potential, but there's also real opportunities for, with that kind of action plan, like, looking at kind of enhanced lighting and sort of having really nice festoon lightings on those lanes, or maybe some artwork that kind of opens up these sort of, these junctions.
Thank you, Laura. And I think the last question was around the office and nighttime economy. Yes, I'll take the office one first. It's really a hot topic at the moment. I mentioned we were at the London Real Estate Forum yesterday, and there was lots of conversations about where London is in the cycle in terms of how viable it is to deliver office floor space, but also housing as well. There's a real viability challenge nationally, pretty acute in London, and parts of Ealing as well. But I think I'm an optimist, so I probably want to focus on some of the really great building blocks we've got in the borough, and in Ealing, this part of the borough in particular. So West Ealing, although it's not a town centre in its own right, it's part of the Ealing Metropolitan Town Centre. So it's within that planning use designation. And the fact it's part of that gives it extra emphasis for attracting commercial development. And that's recognised by the London Plan. It's also recognised by the London Growth Plan, to the extent that Ealing Metropolitan Centre is featured in the London Growth Plan as an office corridor and a hub for office development. And that's very important because global investors see that. They're picking up the London Growth Plan and reading that in there. And to add to that, we also got a couple of sites within the borough referenced within the Opportunity London Inward Investment Prospectus, which again is promoted globally for investors to come to London. And an example of that is a Broadway connection scheme, not technically in West Ealing, but nearby. And we know that British Land has been struggling to get that consent working. But as far as the council is concerned, we want to keep working proactively with those landowners and developers to see what we can make viable, but with the overarching driver and objective of protecting our economy in Ealing Metropolitan Centre. Because if you lose these opportunities that don't come back in the future, so you really have to acknowledge we're in quite a challenging part of the cycle. But some of the conversations I heard yesterday at London Real Estate Forum is that the tide is potentially turning, and office developments may become more viable in the near future. And to add to Ealing's advantage, I did mention the West Tech Corridor previously. That could be very consequential for Ealing, because when people realise that we're at the very heart of the West Tech Innovation Corridor, and they realise that very important institutions like Imperial, world-renowned institutions, are investing hundreds of millions of pounds within the borough of Ealing, that will be a catalytic effect for other investors who might want to come to the borough. And the role of town centres will evolve, or are evolving. So where you might have a predominance of F&B, food and beverage, and retail, we may be having more interesting uses like experiential uses, potentially satellite hubs for life sciences linked to the cluster in North Acton, and other sort of interesting growth sectors as well. The frontier economy is going to play a bigger role coming forward too, and we can't forget the role of AI in all of this as well. So we have to keep pace with that. So being an optimist, I'm hopeful that Ealing, with all those really good ingredients and building blocks, we can certainly compete, or if not outcompete other parts of London. But yeah, Will might come on to some of the development challenges that the industry's suffering. But I think from a council's point of view is how we convene, work in partnership, and be pragmatic as well about how we can try and make schemes viable. The nighttime economy, yeah. So Laura mentioned we launched our nighttime economy strategy last year. I think it's paying dividends in a number of areas, but I think the key thing that wants to do is sort of acknowledge that this part of the borough used to have, I guess, quite a healthy nighttime economy, I know when I speak to some of the colleagues who've been at Ealing Council quite a long time, they would remind me of that. And how do we get back to that? Like a nighttime economy, the key thing to mention, I'm sure you've read the strategy, but the key thing with Ealing's nighttime economy, it's not meant to be about an alcohol-led economy. It's meant to be an economy that, you know, creates an inclusive economy, whether you want to enjoy certain things in the evening or at night time, but also an economy that caters for the seriously high number of night workers you've got in Ealing. Obviously, we've got Port Royal, we've got Heathrow. So out of all the London boroughs, we've probably got the highest number of nighttime workers. And the nighttime economy for those folk is diabolical in terms of if they want to get something nice to eat, something healthy to eat, or something like that, they don't really have that. So it's about really important to make that distinction as well.
Thank you very much. Councillor Crawford and then Councillor Mohan. Councillor Crawford.
Thank you, Councillor Moffin. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship this year. I wanted to look at a local example. So it's brilliant to have Mr. McKenna with us this evening, and it has such a remarkable resume and such a history of investing indeed in Ealing. And I wanted to talk about a local example. So obviously I'm a soon to be ex-councillor for North Acton, and I believe it is the same Mr. Luxton who helped us with the Barbara Street Stage School, and this kind of exemplifies the problem for me, right? Well, it's a great development, and you've done really well, but the Barbara Street Stage School is no more. And the thing that the residents and the people wanted was for some, you know, creative for that to be retained. And if you walk down that road, you've lost the Goldsmith Arms pub. And I appreciate the difficulties that we've got in the nighttime economy. You know, I won't take offence because I actually did spend quite a lot of time King's Cross 20 years ago, Mr. McKenna. You know, it's my job. And I'm an optimist too, like Mr. McDonough. And you know, this is fantastic. But in this particular case, Mr. McKenna, you know, I wrote directly to you about this issue after the planning permission was granted, and you know, I've never had a reply. So I appreciate you know, why my residents, you know, 3,000 of whom petitioned on this, and you know, talked about what they would like and what was stated in the Section 106, some of which has not been delivered yet, can get. And in terms of, but let's be clear, I'm not against any of this at all. I'd actually say that, and as my colleagues know, and I'll call them my colleagues, you know, we've got tremendous potential in Ealing. I mean, I'm an Acton boy, right? I was the first disabled kid to go to a mainstream school. I'm proud of it. You know, my lawyer is now the Prime Minister. How about that for social mobility? And just in North Acton alone, Bukayo Saka, Chloe Kelly, sorry, just in Ealing alone, right? And the potential of the area is huge. I'm proud of it. How do we unlock it? What's the state? It's really difficult. But Mr. McKenna, you were the developer, and I'm reading the glowing. It's a great development, but frankly, why didn't you answer my letter and my email? And is there an explanation for that? Because I'd love to know.
Thank you, Councillor Crawford. I think it's important you have space to say what you'd like to say, but I think the focus of this panel is on the kind of future of development. If the question is about how we can make development work better in the future, that's a perfectly sensible and valid topic for us to discuss. But in terms of previous casework, I'm not sure this is quite the venue for that.
Chair. Really? Or can I rephrase the question and we do it a different way then? Well, no, I don't mean to be confrontational. The second part of my question is all about the opportunity.
I don't mind answering.
Thank you.
I mean, specific to the letter, apologies if I didn't. We did. It was 4 years ago, so forgive me if I've forgotten some of the detail. But we did engage with the community, and we did respond back, as far as I recall. I obviously haven't responded to you. Without delving into the ins and outs, I think your point though is one which I can happily agree with here, which is what we're trying to create here is balanced economies, right? Where you've got arts, it could be nighttime, it could be industry, this isn't about one site, but if you wanted a Barbara Sweet stage school, it was either going to be a performing arts hall, which very openly had been funded charitably by the owner for about 3 years. There was no economic future for it, or it was going to be a residential development. You couldn't combine both on that site. If you look at what we're doing in West Ealing, I'm very happy to show you some of the schemes. The ground floors are all active. You've got a lot of activation on that. So you've got to look at it site specific would be my answer to that. And final one is very happy to discuss separately, but the 106, as far as I'm aware, has been fully complied with, but happy to engage on that.
I'll engage with Mr. McKenna outside of the meeting. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Councillor Mohan.
Thank you, Chair. As a matter of fact, you have already raised what I was going to raise, Chair. But because I feel so concerned about this aspect of things in relation to West Ealing, that I'll stress on that topic. But before I do that, I would also like to thank the officers for the walkabout. It was really helpful the other day. It was good to know that there are very many things in the pipeline, and there are quite a few developments which are happening. My concern is about the vacant shops, vacant businesses on the high street. There is a series, one after the other shop, which has been closed, for some of them for a very, very long period. West Ealing residents, Hanwell residents, I have met so many people who are really concerned about it. There was a time when this street, the high street, was really booming with businesses. And it in fact, as a matter of fact, it continues up to Hanwell. In Hanwell too, there are so many shops which are lying vacant and there is no business happening. I am interested in finding out what specifically is being done to bring these businesses back into action. That's my concern, really. Thank you.
Yeah, hello. My name is Mandar Puranik. I'm head of regeneration, investment, and jobs, and I oversee Ealing and all the west of the 7 towns. So in terms of vacant shops, it's an ongoing engagement. So the challenge for council is if it's a private property, we have limited influence. We have regulatory powers, but or we have enforcement powers. But in terms of regeneration, without incentive in the current economic climate, it's been really challenging post-pandemic to engage with developers and landowners where there are empty properties, empty commercial properties, empty residential properties, a separate matter. I think challenge for West Ealing, and as Will McKenna highlighted, is some of the sites are development sites. But with all of those, Councillor Mohan, the ones you probably visited or walked past, over the last 6 months, the plans which Laura McLean showed in terms of those plans, council has tried and has built up a good database of all of the properties and developments. We presented a map showing all the developments which are approved, but there is also a separate kind of database of properties, who owns them. It's been with the willing landowners and landlords. We have engaged, and we are all trying to ensure that there is the shop is brought back in use. But some of the properties, they are held by companies, companies which are hard to get hold of, investment funds. So it's an ongoing engagement, and our last resort will be to then use some of the legal powers council has to enforce. But we have to be realistic and balanced in the current economic climate that it's very hard to business rates and running shops. So is a challenging economic climate. So we would be using the funds and the access we have, the GLA High Street Place Lab Fund mentioned will be one of those tools to at least build the database and engage first before following the more stricter or heavy-handed approach with businesses. But to an extent, council's resources and hands are tied, because if it's a private property, we can't, unless we have some influence, we cannot enforce against business premises. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe you can go into a little more detail about the direct causes that our engagement has kind of recorded as why these businesses are closing, or indeed why businesses aren't then reopening, and whether the those separate plans on a national, regional and local level offer some succor to those businesses.
I think there are multiple causes. I mean, the kind of overall in Ealing, and this is, we are talking about West Ealing, but when the local plan was produced, and also more regularly, we keep and track state of our high street economy across all the local high streets and metropolitan center and town centers. So the statistics wise, the vacancy rates in West Ealing, yes, they're higher than others, but they're not, in terms of national average, they're not the worst. So there are even worse or more vacant properties in other parts of London. The challenges businesses, so the engagement with those we have engaged with in West Ealing, some of the issues are the demand is not as it is for some of the prime properties. So if you observe there are no vacancies in Southall, for example. Even on Ealing Broadway, there are vacancies, but very limited in that central patch. And it's about it's the local demand. And part of that is the central, some large sections of West Ealing or Uxbridge Road High Street are development sites. And those are currently, they're set for development, and there is no benefit for landlord or a developer to introduce meanwhile use, because that introduces risks. So it's easier for them. So though there are multiple factors, but part of it is demand. And even in West Ealing, the kind of micro level picture is quite different. So on the avenue, on the north side of West Ealing, it's a very, it's a busy high street. There hasn't been any vacancies. The new shop has been let. It's parts of Uxbridge Road and some of the side streets which have struggled. And with engagement, I think with businesses, it's the same issue of, it's probably easier to get a charity shop, but to get a good business with a good covenant, it's been difficult to attract. What we believe in is, with the level of development plan and the nature of those schemes, which you heard about, there will be that the trend will change, and this is why that work we are commissioning in terms of place curation, activation, and trying to engage with also more proactively with the business improvement district. That has been, we were working with them, but over the last year, the conversation since the new term, the bid is now in the new term, it's more about tackling issues on the ground, but also shaping and curating some of those businesses. And there are a number of local businesses represent on the Business Improvement District Board, and they have been quite proactive in tracking vacancies and ensuring that new and local businesses get a chance to be in West Ealing.
Thank you. Mr. McKenna, do you recognise the kind of aspiration that we have for the High Street as being appropriate for the aspiration we have in terms of stalled sites and housing units we hope to deliver? From a commercial perspective, having worked in...
I think I've worked with, in fact, all of the team here for probably 3+ years. So I think the aspiration is definitely there. I would say there's one of the massive challenges. You just touched on the fact that it's so often charity occupiers who become the main occupier there. But I think one of the huge issues is business rates. We've seen that with the sites that we have, and the rates down there are the better part of probably 60% of what the actual market rents are. So in terms of, it was one of the questions I had is, I appreciate business rates are not in your control, but when you talk about trying to attract businesses, whether that's industry, hospitality, retail, they can look at anywhere in London, let's say, right? How can you put Ealing ahead of Brent or one of the other competing borrowers, because for me that is the reality, right? The quality of the tenants that are going in there isn't really assisting. Just very briefly, to me, a strategy that can work if you've got longer term ownership is, for us on the two sites in particular, we're very much taking the view that the ground floors are not there to be made for profit immediate. So it's more taking a view of, if you can get the right caliber of tenant into the ground floor of those buildings and you start the activation, then being very open with you, in commercial terms, in 5 years' time, you will attract the right tenant. But there needs to be a catalyst. So, I mean, if the council-owned buildings, for instance, they could probably control to a better extent who goes in. So.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kim Nagpal.
Thank you, Chair. I have two questions. One is on the 20-minute neighbourhoods, which everyone in the room agrees is a fantastic strategy. But there is disparity in the various towns in terms of some neighbourhoods having access to, say, more green spaces or more community hubs, etc. So is there a strategy beyond the 20-minute neighbourhoods that seeks to address that disparity for various neighbourhoods across towns? And my second question is about the West Ealing High Street again. So what I want to understand is, are we looking to attract small local businesses, or are we looking to attract, say, large chains? And I ask this because, Laura, you touched on wanting to attract people from, say, Northfield or Pittshanger. And I know the community in Northfield are very passionate about having small businesses on Northfield Avenue and South Ealing Road. They don't actually want big chains there. So I guess to some respect, have we spoken to the community about what they're looking for? Do we have a strategy for what we're looking to attract? Thank you.
Thanks. I'll take the first question. So yeah, it's a really good point, and I think a lot of what we're trying to achieve through the 7 towns approach is about equity and about understanding what those needs are. So green space is a really good example that is harder to it takes more planning, strategic planning, to bring a new green space into an area, but we are looking at that. So for example, obviously you'll know about the regional park plans and the idea that the regional park then has these fingers that go out into the different areas to make sure everywhere's got that access to the regional park. And we're actually doing a study at the moment, or about to embark on one, to actually look at that quality of green space that we have in the borough, and where we can improve it and increase it. And as part of schemes that come through the system in terms of the development management function, we will, if there is a deficiency in open space, for example, we will look to secure that. It just doesn't tend to be your big parks, it tends to be smaller spaces, but they can still be useful for recreation and spending time in, and amenity. So I think that amenity point is part of the 20-minute neighbourhoods. It's key to understand how you can bring the things that communities need closer to their doorstep.
Sorry, carry on.
Thank you for your question. I think we've got to respond to sort of like the local demand and what like our local residents and communities would like to see. But I think it's also dependent on the sort of scale of the space. If you have a large floor plate, you will unfortunately be attracting like a larger maybe chain or a larger provider, whether it be a gym or something that sort of represents them that you see across the high street. But then when you have the smaller spaces, there's that opportunity for those more boutique opportunities of like small local businesses. But I think through the work that we're doing with the High Street Place Labs, we're looking to sort of maybe identify that and to sort of understand what that need is. But I agree with you completely. Like the businesses I like to see in my local area are the ones that are run by local people.
Councillor Crawford.
Thank you. So the first question is a very simple one. What is the West Ealing Action Group and who is part of it? And then really, Mr. McKenna asked a set of really interesting questions to the officers who, frankly, are constrained by what they can say because they're officers of this council. I'll take up the challenge, Mr. McKenna, very directly. I'll take you around everywhere in Ealing, right? And I'll show you why Ealing beats Brent hands down. right? Brent's got Wembley Stadium. Look at the development of Wembley Stadium. Look at what happened. Look at what Brent Council did. Look at what Raheem Sterling did. Right, look at how long that took. Look at how overwhelmingly late they were. Look at how much money the Football Association owes on that project. They're mortgaged into it. I'll give you an example from my first job whilst I was at university. I was proud to work for the late Tester Jail as a university student on the bid in 2004 to bring the Olympic Games to London. I was proud that we won. We beat Paris with a wonderful bid. Fantastic. And what did we do with the Olympic Stadium? They gave it to West Ham United, right? With a deal that completely abolished the whole ethos of the regeneration of that. And unfortunately, Dame Tessa has sadly passed away. You know, and I see the potential of my local area. Right, I'm proud of it. Genuinely, I'll take you around every inch of my ward that is no longer. You know, Mr. McDonald will gladly, and we were talking about it before. I'm proud, Councillor Moffat. It may sound strange. I thought it was a wonderful Ealing Council initiative to show the President of the United States yesterday the older common development area. Right. Fantastic that you flew into RAF Northolt and drove right the way through my ward, all the way through the OPDC. But let's be clear, right? The OPDC is not in these guys' parameters. The OPDC planning committee that legislates on these things has never turned down a planning application. It's never done it, right? So the challenge is to the developer. I understand exactly what you're saying, sir, which is that the small business creation has been strangled over the last 15 years. We know what the reasons are. The reasons thoroughly are political, right? And we know that wage growth has shrunk and we can't build and do all this. I agree with you, you know, fundamentally. But please allow me to offer in my final months as a councillor after 16 years of serving, the ability for my residents, you know, my life chances, for my young people, who Councillor Nagpal served brilliantly in setting up a lot of these things. You know, I'd love to, really, genuinely, take you around the parts of Acton. Well, we'll go around all 7 towns if you've got the time, sir, and look at how that investment that you can deliver can unlock the things that we have to wait for legislation for, right? I'll show you where we can do a little bit on business rates and a little bit here. We're really adaptable, and you know, I realise it's not really a question, but I'd like to answer this. I'd like to answer. I've got long left, Councillor Moffat. You know, we ain't got. Let's roll up our sleeves and get to it. And just one more. There's a brilliant music academy on Eastman Road, AB Music Academy, for 25 years, set up by Romanian visitors to this country from Romania. Right? They've produced some of the most wonderful, brilliant local music and entertainment, right? They serve as the route for Twyford Church of England High School's Music Academy, right? Fantastic students through that. I won't embarrass them, and you know, but there's a lot of names that you all know, and Jamal Edwards as well, right? Look, we can do this, but it's going to take, frankly, a team effort. Thank you.
I think at the beginning of that, there was a very clear question. I don't know if anyone can answer about the West Ealing Action Group.
Yeah, I'll answer that. But just before I do, just going back to one of the previous questions, I just want to acknowledge that there is some powers available to the council now to tackle long-standing vacant retail units through something called high street rental auctions. So that's something that the team are exploring, particularly through the West Ealing Places Lab. But you can imagine that could be quite a challenging process, and it's quite new, but it's something, it's in our toolkit that we'll try and use if appropriate. But yeah, West Ealing Action Group, that's a very formative group. Basically the council again convening a number of key stakeholders within the West Ealing area, including the likes of the BID, some of the local organisations Laura mentioned in her presentation, and it's a group that will evolve over time. We'll probably have to we'll find out who else can join that group, because ultimately, I think it's been said a lot already in the room, and you said it just there, and I can't. So this can only be achieved through a team effort. We all have to work together to try and make the likes of West Ealing and other town centres the best it can possibly be. So yeah, that's what that group is.
Can you confirm for me the makeup of it and whether there are any local have the local residents or the local residents part of it? The people who I've dealt with for many years. You know what I'm talking about. They've written to me, as far as they tried to write to me. I can't get into my email. They say that they're not part of it, that they haven't been invited to it. Is that correct?
As I say, it's a formative group. The stakeholder is the stakeholders support.
That's fine. Can I pick it up with you outside the?
Of course, yeah.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gallant.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. So, I was belatedly saying welcome, by the way. Thanks very much for attending tonight. It was really good. Look, you take the risk. You're the developer, and I just wanted to hear how you responded to Councillor. No. Well, I'd like to hear you responded to, but I'd like to sort of frame the question, if you like. So, because we've got to make recommendations that come out of this scrutiny panel. How would you like to see the council exercising its convening powers, its sort of umbrella vision of the borough, probably the best umbrella vision of the borough, so that we can generate more of what you do?
Big question. Just to confirm, presumably you're specifically asking my thoughts around encouraging the development side.
Well, you're coming up with the imaginative ideas about having lost leading ground floors and first floors. Yeah. You're prepared to look at that, take a risk on that for 5 years and so on. All that is what I call commercial imagination. Mm-hmm. Now the council can sort of help that process for you and other developers, and I'd like to hear that can be done.
There's a long list. If just to run through a few high level ones. So speed of investment is crucial. It's probably the same across any sector, but so certainty around decision making and speed of investment. So if we're talking development, that obviously starts with planning. So there is going to be a new local plan. Clarity around that. I would actually champion Ealing's planning department here, in the sense that there is a very clear strategy. If you look at committee, it's a sensibly ran committee. As a developer who sort of sits and invests across London and speaks to many people will say that Ealing is a sensible planning department where you can get things done. So they're doing that right. Not meant as a criticism, you can always improve speed. And I suppose what I would say is consistency of that. We have had some applications which are very swift, very linear in terms of progress, others less so. If as a council one could get that consistency, it's much easier to look at investment. When we move beyond planning, I would say coordination of infrastructure. I know I mentioned it before, but if we look in Ealing, in West Ealing, I can't remember exactly how many, but we have well over a couple £1 million of Section 106 money effectively committed to the council, and that it's across various things, healthcare, etc. But a lot of that is actually in parks, security, pedestrianisation, road improvements. Again, they are working on it, and it is being coordinated. But speaking very directly, if that is implemented and moving forward, there's a very clear plan where they know they've got, right, these are the 10 programs. We need to fund each one. I don't know exactly how all the budgeting works, but and from a developer perspective, you can start to actually say, right, okay, I happen to own this building and this building, and there is this road in between. We've seen in their local plan or in their program of works that they're going to pedestrianise, let's say Canberra Road, for instance, and St James's. And they're going to focus on opening the back of buildings up and making that a dual. that from a landowner and a developer perspective is real. If you can bank on that being done, suddenly these challenges we're talking about at ground level can very genuinely be answered is maybe too strong a word, but there's a route where you can see actually, okay, there is hope and you can transform something. Ultimately certainty around, from a developer perspective, the more certainty you get, the better. One of the issues we've had in the last 3 to 5 years is there's been no certainty across anything. And I don't just mean planning, I'm just talking the whole economy, right? And hence why nothing has happened. But I think the more clarity and clear framework a council can provide a long-term investor or developer in a borough, that, the easier it is to decide to invest in that borough.
Thank you. Thanks.
Councillor Sidhu?
Why not get an answer to my question? You let Councillor Gallant just ask more questions, and I assume he's going to answer my question. Yeah.
Which question, Councillor, do you not think is asked?
I mean, look, Councillor Gallant said he'd like to. Look, I agree with a lot of what Mr. McKenna said, but I did say, so shall I phrase it again? We talked about. You said, how do we beat Brent? How do we beat competitor boroughs? And I said, I'll show you.
I mean, I'll show you. It's not a question.
No, sorry, Councillor Moffat. Like, I don't mean to be rude. That wasn't the totality of the question. I talked about some areas in which it's fine. Like, if you don't want me to ask questions, we won't have it. But like, you allowed Councillor Gallant, and he said he was quite interested to hear the answer. He's your voice chair, so it's fine. Like,
yeah, Councillor, I'm interested to see it. I'm interested in Ealing being the best, and I'm interested to hearing from a developer, as you've asked, how we can do better than those other boroughs. That's the question, right? Let him answer the question.
I think just to be really clear, I am a massive champion of Ealing, hence why I'm here, and I've worked with the council for 10 plus years. So I'd be very happy to walk around, by the way.
Thank you.
And yeah.
Councillor Sidhu.
Just want to say thank you for your time today, and welcome as also Mr. McKenna to Scrutiny. I think the first note I make is that we don't really have any KPIs or success measures at the moment, and I find that without those you can't really hold people accountable and you can't monitor it, and monitoring progress is then something that we are able to scrutinise on in Scrutiny, so that would be great. But also I wanted to ask whether a risk analysis was done. So you've mentioned, especially with businesses, and Mr. McKenna mentioned that 3 businesses were open. They were generally quite thriving businesses. It would have boosted local economy, but because of the footfall that doesn't exist currently in West Ealing and West London, those unfortunately had to close. So has there a risk analysis been done on how we are able to maintain that going forward, and if there is any economic downturns, how we are able to then bounce back, and how West Ealing will be able to bounce back from that, God forbid if something like that happens. And I know it mentions the green economy, but it doesn't specify how regeneration will be embedded in net zero policies, renewable energy or low carbon construction either. So I was just wondering if you could brush up on that yourself, because there was a bit of a lack there. And is anything else that I've missed? No, and it was just milestones and delivery plans and timescales, if possible.
Okay, I'll get the question around KPIs and risk analysis. Well, particularly as we develop this High Street Place lab for West Ealing, there'll be a lot of KPIs and risk analysis done as part of that project as under development. But in advance of that, how we've been monitoring the activity of our high streets has been largely done through Ealing's High Streets Task Force. So that's the task force that we set up just around the time of the pandemic to enable us to invest money in our high streets to protect and increase the footfall, and also ensure people could operate safely within the high streets. So there's data that we collect through that, and that's through the GLA also. So we always keep a close eye on that. We've also got a number of other data sets that we rely upon. There's one that we can monitor the number of high growth businesses that are coming into the borough and investing in our various commercial areas in the high streets, but also our industrial areas. And there's also data that we share with other West London boroughs through the West London Alliance and OPDC, so we can benchmark ourselves about how we're performing. I guess on a positive note, Ealing bounced back quite well after the pandemic. The footfall sort of came up quite quickly compared to some other West London boroughs. And I guess that's testament probably to the work of the council to ensure that people could reconnect with their local high streets, because we've got some really amazing high streets in Ealing. Obviously, they've got their challenges, but that's not unique to Ealing. That persists all over many parts of London. And I visit many boroughs, and there's many high streets are in much worse states of decline than we would see here. Yeah, so just to assure you, Councillor, yeah, there'll be lots of that infrastructure put in, particularly as we develop the High Street Place Labs, not least because the GLA would expect that from us as a funding partner.
I come in on the green side of things and net zero. So yeah, I mean, we can always emphasize that more, but we do have so our local plan that's going through the system at the moment has got some quite ambitious policies in that, and that will feed into everything that we do in West Ealing. So I'm kind of confident that we're linked up on that. And just as you've mentioned, climate, a bit of a plug, because we've got our Climate Action Week next week starting on Saturday. So please do search Ealing Climate Week, and there's loads of exciting activities happening all around the borough in all of the 7 towns.
Fantastic. Councillor Crawford, a question?
Yeah, thank you. Look, we've talked about North Acton quite a lot tonight in vague terms, and obviously, you know, it's my parish for a little bit longer. On infrastructure, as Mr. McKenna has mentioned, you mentioned at the beginning, HS2, Heathrow Airport, all of these things. Well, HS2, in my opinion, isn't going to be built. And where's it going to go to? And on the delivery, right, we lobby and we try and we fail, frankly. I mean, the Elizabeth line is down currently. No one's going anywhere. Acton Main Line, it was promised when we did Acton Main Line, and we did it late. We had to lobby for more money for Acton Main Line. You know, the 6 to 8 trains, the capacity isn't there. It was promised that we wouldn't have any disruption at Acton Main Line with regard to HS2, and there is every Sunday, 2, 3 Sundays, 4 Sundays out of the month. Councillor Moffat, you can't get on. It's just closed. Acton Main Line's closed. That's no good for the people of Acton, North Acton. So you know, we're not really there where we need to be, and a lot of these things. I mean, I'm sure Mr. McKenna would release, and many other developers would release lots more money. You've got huge development sites all along the A40. We're not building them, and it's
Councillor Crawford, I wonder whether you could move to the question.
I've asked a number of questions, as you did, Chair, and as several other people did. I'm nearly finished, and well, I'll stop because you've interrupted me.
I'm not sure I heard a question in any of that. So do you want to phrase it as a question that ends in a question mark?
It's really, you're really going to be, so let's do some questions. Number 1, how is the council currently lobbying HS2 to avoid the absolute logjam that's going on and mitigating the problems that my constituents are facing? Number 2, how are we delivering? What's the position on Heathrow Airport? Right, the nighttime economy equally, and that's huge in those areas. What's the position on helping those key workers who are doing those projects get some nighttime economy? And number 4, the North Acton Square. We spent £24.6 million on the North Acton Square since I became a councillor in 2010. It's got worse. So let's start there. Those are some questions.
Okay, High Speed 2. Yes, High Speed 2. It's really has potential of big impacts in the borough. So we work closely with High Speed 2 to ensure that the impacts are mitigated from the construction, but also try and secure a legacy from that as well. It's very challenging, as you can imagine. Mark Wilde, the new CEO, announced a reset, and we were hopeful that would be positive for Ealing to enable us to have more fruitful conversations with them, but it's still very challenging. But as a council and as an officer, we have to persist and have those conversations. And for example, most recently, we convened discussions with local MP Rupa Huck to help with those things as well. And she has met with Mark Wilde, and I believe, I'm not sure if it's next Saturday or Saturday coming up soon, Mark Wilde will be on site to meet some of the local businesses and residents to talk about the challenges and that. But the council, yeah, we're speaking to them on a regular basis to try and get the best outcome for Ealing. Question on North Acton Square. Yeah, there's currently a project for activating the square, so we're investing some infrastructure into that to try and create a number of small units to provide more activity. So it's a public space, but also a space where people can dwell and enjoy. And I think that's important for North Acton, given the population of particularly students and businesses and residents there. What was the other questions? There's two more, wasn't there?
Heathrow and the nighttime economy.
Nighttime economy.
Heathrow.
Yeah, we discussed the nighttime economy. We've got a nighttime economy strategy which sets out direction of travel for the borough. Heathrow, yeah, there's discussions that they're having with government. From an Ealing Council officer point of view, Heathrow is obviously a huge employer for a number of Ealing residents, so we have to maintain a relationship with them. But as regards to their future plans, that's not something that we're focusing on. It's about how we're working with the existing residents that work at that airport to make sure that they've got the best support possible. And as I said earlier, most of those Ealing residents who work at Heathrow are nighttime workers. So I guess maybe some of the question was linked to that as well, and we're doing everything we can to support those people.
Thank you very much. Just to follow very briefly on from Councillor Sidhu's point about monitoring and benchmarking. In terms of our attractiveness against our kind of neighbours, or what we might refer to as competitors in terms of high streets, do we do any work to benchmark our attractiveness as a place to do business, to see whether we're as attractive as some of our near neighbours? We talked at the beginning of the session about how our local plan was aligned with both the London and the London plan and the National Industrial Strategy. What do we have in place to ensure continued alignment as those pieces inevitably develop and change? And thirdly, do we have kind of monitoring in place to see how we are doing at meeting the council plan as we come to the end of this 4-year period?
I can maybe touch upon benchmarking. For the work in Ealing Metropolitan Centre, we were looking in particular like the benefits of the Elizabeth line, and like what we saw with the with people leaving the station from the data from TfLs, that when you look at like pre-COVID, but since the Elizabeth line has opened up, we are reaching those like people coming into Ealing. We are back to those kind of pre-pandemic levels, whereby our kind of neighbouring competitors like Shepherd's Bush, Hammersmith, they haven't sort of seen those return numbers. So we are doing well, and we are regularly looking at we are a Met Centre, but we want to be competing with Central London because we are positioned, equidistant from Heathrow and Bond Street, and so we're really sort of pushing that out there because it's one of the big benefits of Ealing as a borough. But yeah, we are regularly sort of like looking at competitive like areas, but the bid talks about the success and the attraction of Ealing Broadway and the Met Centre.
Continued alignment on the London plan, our local plan to London plan and the National Industrial Strategy?
I'll pick up the alignment with the London Growth Plan because that's quite relevant to the economy we've been discussing, and then Jen will probably pick up the London plan, which aligns with the local plan. So with the London Growth Plan, there's continuous partnership engagement between all the boroughs and the GLA and London councils in particular. So just an example of that, which I'm heavily involved in, is one of the key actions from the London Growth Plan is to create an inclusive talent strategy. and there's been a number of workshops convened by London councils to enable officers to inform. That's just one example of how the actions are being delivered in a very collaborative way. So inclusive talent strategy is something that's going to be published, I believe, in the next couple of months. Jen, do you want to pick up the London plan?
Yeah, so on the London plan, we know that the GLA are working on a new London plan. The Towards the New London Plan document came out earlier in the year, and we as officers are engaged with GLA officers on that, and will kind of feed into certain projects on that. Our local plan, as mentioned, is going through the process at the moment, and we have, even as part of that process, been clear that we know that we'll have to relook at our local plan quite soon after the new London plan comes out, because that will have higher housing figures, it will have higher jobs figures in it, and we need to adapt to that. And actually, when a new London sort of spatial strategy comes out, and there's any conflict between the local plan and the London plan, then the newest trumps it. So if the London plan had something different, then that would trump ours. And then on the council plan points, Connor, kind of one of the slides we kind of went through the kind of links to the council plan deliverables in terms of the kind of three main ones. I don't think, although we'll have to check, that we have any specific kind of deliverables on this particular project, but it does deliver into that kind of broader economic inclusive growth, climate action, etc.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the officers who have taken a long time to offer their thoughts and observations to us tonight. I'm very grateful, as I'm sure are the rest of the panel. Thank you very much, and particularly thank you very much as well, Mr. McKenna, for coming and talking to us. So thank you for that. I think it's now time to move to recommendations. Do members of the panel have suggested recommendations for our report? While people are maybe thinking, I've penned some that I'm suggesting. Reducing turnover on the high street is obviously came up at the start in terms of the feeling it gave of that the high street had low occupancy even when it doesn't have low occupancy, as well as then maybe giving them slightly more positive vision in places that are stalled developments, that actually this is not an abandoned site, this is the plan for the site in the future, and whether we can take a slightly more proactive kind of stance on displaying what our vision for the future is, both with individual sites but also maybe for the area, and offering like a public board of what the vision for this town is and how Ealing Council is working towards that, to give people a sort of a sense of something that we can be judged against. The kind of the council services and how they support development in how they support places to redevelop themselves. The phrase curated spaces is a very pleasing one, as is the idea of encouraging that north-south connection. And I wonder whether we can try and have whether we can recommend a slightly more coherent curated spaces policy to ensure that our ambition for both commercial and residential sites are aligned and match, rather than being too far one way or the other. We've talked about the possible future improvement of commercial office space, and that are we ready to take advantage of that? Not to get too speculative, but are we in a position that we can jump into that in the event it does improve? And then the final point I think that Mr. McKenna was very keen to stress is that commercial investors are keen on long-term confidence, long-term kind of certainty about what's going to happen. And is there a way for us to drag out recommendations longer than just one term? I think 4 years is probably not long-term enough for commercial investors, but is better than nothing. Councillor Crawford.
Picking up on the challenge and the comments made by Mr. McKenna as a representative on that last point, Mr. McKenna also talked about infrastructure and deliverability, and I don't think they're unachievable. You certainly can, and we have recommended previously in other committees, 10-year strategies, 15-year strategies, 20-year strategies, and I think the officers would probably, and the cabinet would welcome that guidance. But I think, can I just pick up on the point and maybe get clarity from Mr. McKenna on sort of whether I'm on the right lines here, when he was talking about that very localized, you've got a development here, and I think he used Canberra and Singapore as the examples in the specific to the West Ealing. You've got a development here, sir, and you've got a development here, and the council specifies that, you know, maybe they're going to pedestrianise. And before anyone leaps on these words, because this meeting is being live streamed, this is a hypothetical suggestion from the developer that hypothetically something might be, and that's aligned to your point as to those curated spaces, that infrastructure, what that looks like, so that we've got a clear demonstration. And I think that's part of what Mr. McKenna was speaking about. Well, I want to make sure I'm not misquoting.
No, you're spot on. So and it's an example of where actually coordination with the developers can bring this about, because it is actually happening, and it is now. So Canberra Road, just very briefly, that is effectively a service road that's at the back of Broadway. And you end up, there's not much surveillance, and you end up with activities going on there that discourage others from using the high street. Much of the strategy here is actually, can you look at a strategy which, yes, it needs to be serviced, but can you service at certain hours? Can you pedestrianize certain bits of the road? And then going back to the point from a developer perspective, if you see that there's that vision, you know, suddenly we have a site that could have 3 facades, let's say, rather than being front and side or front and back. So we've very much changed our strategy. So it's not turn your back to the back. It's actually, right, how do we have something that spills onto St. James's? So yeah, it's very much that. It's I would suggest trying to almost keep it local, so that it is something that can be done in more like a 5-year horizon, rather than a pipe dream of 10 years when we all know things can change. And, you know, in each area, in your area, for instance, I'm sure there'd be a list of 5 things that, you know, would be top of the list. And and then it becomes very clear, and I won't leave it to myself to work out how to fund it, but you've got things like Section 106 and the GLA grant that you've just applied for, that you can then start to take these one at a time.
It's not like the 5-year point on a specific localized level, but one of the points you were making was a 20-year strategy, a commitment.
Yes, yeah.
So they're 2 different points.
Two different things. Yeah.
So he wants, from a developer point of view, the local plan to be crystallised, and to be a clear thing for over 20 years. This is what, and we've got a bit of that, but I think it's, forgive me, I think it's worth this committee giving a clear steer this evening that, whilst I would say developers shouldn't get everything that they want, and that's not an uncontroversial view, you know, I think there's a role for local residents in this process, as we've talked about, and I think that's there. So how you match it up. So the thing I'm hearing, and what I'd like to recommend is, yes, on the localised point of sort of, and your point, Councillor Moffat, of that very localised and specific to this scheme, and I think we should build that as the case study, but also the 20-year strategy of what the development goals are, and that we give a steer that local, what succeeds the local plan, because we don't know, you know, is that's also committing to some infrastructure goals too. But I can write it down and send it across, and you can decide, the 2 of you and whoever else, whether it's a good idea.
I think the idea that we can recommend that there be both a sort of a short-term set of ambitions which we can deliver because it's within one council term, but then also a longer term, what we hope will be the longer term ambition set out separately is a perfectly sensible recommendation that we can make. Are you comfortable with that?
I think so, and the 7 towns element lies in this. I think that's the planning thing, isn't it? The big question that my residents have is, well, we haven't even talked about it because we talked too much about other things, but there's an 8th town, right? And that's mine. It's not mine, but it's my patch, right? And the problem is the 8th town is entirely in the gift of something that isn't Ealing Council, right? So I do think that all these things need to be clearly written down, because the local plan is going to become something else, and you know, and that's the steer from this committee. So I would say yes, but the 7 towns thing needs to be really clearly defined. What are, you know, why should, I think it was Councillor Sidhu who said, you know, you've got to get the 7, the offer has to be the same, and that's really difficult because the areas are different, aren't they? Anyway, I've said enough in this meeting, so I'll shut up.
No, I think that's good and helpful. Any other recommendations from?
So we just explore what the council can do in relation to vacant and commercial property. You've mentioned there's a new measure in place, and perhaps explore that and bring those powers together as much as possible.
Very brief suggestion on that point. You know, I'm the outgoing secretary of the Ealing Co-op Party. The government's got a drive to double the cooperative sector. On this point, you know, Mr. McKenna said you need to get reputable tenants, long-term tenants. They might not be right. There's a space here. There's a real opportunity. There's funding right there now. We can go and get. We can bid for, right, to do some of these things in these co-working spaces, in the office. The office infrastructure has changed, so it's bold. But I'd ask you to consider looking at what the cooperative growth fund can deliver in this space in that very office environment.
I think that's fine. I think we would all fundamentally agree with that. And we talked about that again, not to overuse the word curated, but the idea that the council might take a proactive choice about sort of below commercial rate access to our spaces to ensure we set off in the right direction and encourage other good development. It would, I think, be well within that policy that the cooperative movement would be a positive thing to bring into the area and something that the council should seek to encourage. Any other recommendations, or are we moderately comfortable?
Discussion about creative. Councillor Gavin made a plea, and we talked about it, and I talked about the Barber Street stage school. Mr. McKenna's absolutely right. I won't say this, but you know, you had to choose in that particular case between residential and the stage school. But there is a thriving. We've got a cultural enterprise zone in my patch. I think we need to join it up. So I'd like to suggest that there should be some more work around the creative and the arts industry, similar to the challenge that I laid down to Mr. McKenna. You know, there's real opportunity to bring investment through funds that are out there at the moment that we as this council, the council is not bidding for. We are not doing it. That's no fault of anybody around the table. We can't bid for everything that we want, and we might not get it. But I think we have huge music, sporting, cultural. Really, that's the thing. I think we can beat any other borough and many other places, not just in the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland. Sorry, Connor, but around the world. I really do. Thank you.
I think, again, we would say that it's absolutely in line with the idea of mixed use developments, that no development should be purely commercial or purely housing, and that those kind of ground floor high street units would encourage cultural. And we'll make sure that we mention it separately, but I think that absolutely is in the spirit of what we've already discussed. And so with that, I think we can move towards closing this meeting. The date of the next, is there any other business that I need to make sure that we do? The date of the next panel is 7 p.m. on the 18th of November. And thank you all very much for your contributions tonight. It has certainly been a lively discussion, and I am very grateful to everyone who's contributed and those of you who have given up your evenings. Thank you all very much.